What is the purpose of music? I would say that its purpose is to get people to listen to it. But how does a song do that? Most songs do it by catching your attention. But what about the others? Those that are designed to be just as easily ignored as they are enjoyed? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Ambient music is a genre that's perfectly engineered for the background of life. I myself usually listen to it while doing homework and I want a break from lo-fi girl. Sometimes I just want music that reminds me of human existence as little as possible. As I do with all of my genre guides, I'll be discussing artists that, while still under the same umbrella, have different enough influences so that there is adequate variety. You'd be surprised just how different these artists can be while still being in the same family. Let's cut to the chase. Like many good things in life, ambient music originated in France, even though they didn't call it ambient at the time. Composer Erik Satie arguably planted the first seed for the genre when he wrote a series of pieces he dubbed furniture music. No, it's not music that's just recordings of furniture being moved, although that is what I originally thought. Rather, it was music meant to be played during dinner and other household activities. I think of it as melodious, softening the noises of the knives and forks at dinner, not dominating them, not imposing itself. It would fill up those heavy silences that sometimes fall between friends dining together. It would spare them the trouble of paying attention to their own banal remarks, and at the same time it would neutralize the street noises which so indiscreetly enter into the play of conversation. I've listened to some of this music, and while it's definitely more filled out than I expected, you can definitely tell what it would later evolve into. The composer John Cage would contribute to the genre with his recording 433. There is no music, just silence. You're supposed to simply sit there and focus on the surrounding noises. Frankly, if I wanted to do that, I would just sit there by myself. I don't see why I have to play a silent track in the background, but whatever. Art's not meant to be questioned. Throughout the 60s and 70s, the development of tape recording technology increased the capacity for musical experimentation, such as the development of the musique concrète movement. Those of you who have watched the second half of my Beatles two-parter will know that I'm a big fan of their Revolution No. 9 experimental song.
Number 8? Number 8?
These guys were sampling back when a sample was still a physical object. One other technology that would greatly aid the growth of ambient music was the synthesizer. This made it possible to create sounds not achievable on guitar, piano, or anything else. There were many artists during this period making proto-ambient music, but at this point, I just want to get the ball rolling and talk about some proper ambient musicians. Starting off, here's a guy that there's a good chance you've already heard, Brian Eno. While Brian Eno isn't single-handedly responsible for ambient music's existence as a genre, he's the one who gave it its name. He started out his career playing with the Kings of Horny album covers, Roxy Music. Deciding that working with other people wasn't for him, he went solo. Shortly after this, something happened that would change the course of music as we know it. He got hit by a car. While recovering, a friend bought him an album of heart music. He played it while lying in bed, but soon realized that, of his two speakers, one was turned down quite a bit and the other was outright turned off. Lacking the energy to get up and fix this, he kept listening as it was, and the experience changed what he thought music could sound like. He would release a few albums dipping his toes into the world of ambience, such as Discreet Music and the Evening Star collaboration with Robert Fripp of King Crimson. In 1978, though, he would release Ambient 1, Music for Airports, and this newfangled style of music finally had a name. The 4-song, 42-minute album consists entirely of keyboards and heavily treated vocals. I'm not going to go into the parts I like about each song because you're not supposed to listen to individual songs from this album, only all the way through. When I listened to it while doing homework, I often found myself losing track of how much time had passed. Really, that's what this style of music is best meant to do. As the title suggests, Eno intended for this album to be played in public spaces such as airports and elevators. He couldn't imagine why such dull places shouldn't at least have background music to inspire thought and calmness. Think of it as Muzak, but intellectual. Indeed, this album was briefly installed at New York's LaGuardia Airport in 1980. Eno would go on to record many more albums in this style, as well as one particularly significant piece. Remember when I said that there was a good chance you had already heard him? Well, here's the thing. That's him right there. If this video gets demonetized because of a 5-second clip of music, I am going to lose it. Eno would go on to record many more albums in the genre and is still active today. I would go into some of his other releases, but he already has enough exposure, and I want to talk about some artists I listen to more often. I should also let you know that this list is going to be almost all solo artists. Ambient is by design a genre that's not really good for full bands. Up next, we're going to talk about the best redhead to hit the world since Anne of Green Gables. A fellow by the name of Aphex Twin. Hailing from Cornwall, England, Aphex Twin got into the acid techno genre at only 14 and would quickly embark on a musical education consisting of buying records, going to clubs, and smoking inhuman amounts of weed. With these lessons, he soon began writing stuff of his own. While he was very much rooted in techno, he would also go on to utilize calmer influences in his music. He would release his first album, the creatively titled Selective Ambient Works 8592, in 1992. While it definitely has a lot of ambience in it and remains arguably his best record, I wouldn't quite call it ambient music, in spite of its title. There's simply too much percussion and danceable elements in it. The same can't be said about the follow-up, Selected Ambient Works Volume 2. When I first listened to this album on Spotify and saw its 2.5-hour runtime, I was intimidated, to say the least. 2 days later, when I finally finished it, I was proud I took on such a task. On this record, Aphex masters the art of repetition. Most songs are centered around only a few motifs, and yet they manage to draw you in. While Eno's music is just barely there in the background, this album is enveloping. There's extensive use of synth pads, and it gives the songs a very dreamlike quality. They're a type of synthesizer that has less punch to them than a normal keyboard, and are meant to fill out the gaps in a song and make it sound bigger. They have a very swelling sound to them. When they're not accompanying a main keyboard line, they're perfect for ambient music. This album in particular uses them perfectly. The song Number 3 remains one of the few Aphex Twin songs that nearly brings a tear to my eye. That's another thing about this album. The songs, with one exception, don't have titles, just numbers. Quirky. The only titled song, Blue Calx, as well as the opener, Number 1, are the other best tracks in my opinion. Stone in Focus, unofficial title, a song not on the US release, is also a great one. After this release, Aphex would return to his techno roots, and his later albums would stray pretty far from the calming nature of this one. There would still be a good number of peaceful songs scattered throughout, however. One particular song I like is Asatsana, off 2014's Syro. It's a soft piano track that stays at the same slow pace throughout, and the playing itself is very simple. There are also bird chirping noises in the background, and it feels like you're in the park while listening to it. Very good. I'm planning to make a full video on Aphex Twin at some point, so look forward to that. Up next, we have a bit of a contrast with the artists we've had so far. Some music that's very much ambient, but has a good amount of other stuff mixed in. Most notably, unlike the artists I've talked about so far, this one's a girl. I'm talking about the one and only Grouper. Originally hailing from Los Angeles' colder, techier cousin to the north, by which I mean San Francisco, Grouper put out her self-titled debut in 2005. She would go on to release 3 more albums that Wikipedia doesn't consider important enough to have articles for. I'd say they're missing out, as Way There Crept is an eerie banger, even if the songs do kind of blend into one. In 2008, she would unleash upon this world her breakthrough, Dragging a Dead Deer Up a Hill. One thing that sets us apart from Eno and Aphex is the heavy folk influence. Many songs have heavily layered acoustic guitar, which violates the so far unspoken rule of only synths. Wikipedia doesn't even classify this album as ambient, but I'm here to say that I don't care. One additional feature I like is the singing. Ambient music is often instrumental, but when there is singing, it's always cool. Grouper's singing voice is really pretty, and with the effects that are added, it's just beautiful. This album is definitely a good deal more hook-heavy than the ones I've mentioned so far. Heavy Water, I'd Rather Be Sleeping is definitely my favorite song off this one. It's also very fun to play on guitar, in part because it's an open D tuning. Disengaged and Wind and Snow are some other songs I particularly like. The 2011 follow-up was the 2-album series AIA Dream Loss and AIA Alien Observer. These albums take the ambience of Dead Deer and amp it up considerably, with most tracks having no guitar in favor of synthesizers. Most outlets say that Alien Observer is a more accessible one, and I definitely do prefer it, if not just because the song She Loves Me That Way was the first of hers I ever heard. Both of them are definitely worth listening to. Other noteworthy albums of hers are The Man Who Died in His Boat, which I listened to in part due to that title, and Grid of Points, which with its only 20-minute long runtime would have been right at home in my mathcore video. Overall, Grouper is a great artist to listen to when you're feeling melancholy, I've found. Nothing makes you feel better like wallowing for a bit. Even when you're not sad, it's still nice. Random, but while doing listening research for this video, I went to Grouper's artist page on Spotify for the first time. Previously, I had just been going directly to the albums. Anyway, I saw that her most listened to song was over 100 million listens more than the next most popular. This just amazed me. What about this one song makes it so much more popular than the others? I checked it out, and it's definitely accessible for her, but still. I'm not complaining, I'm happy she has such a popular song, but god damn. Up next, we're going to be heading back across the pond, but not to the UK. We're going to be heading to the Alps to check out our next subject, a guy named Fennesz. Born and raised in Austria, this floppy-haired fellow spent much of his early career in the experimental band Mace. As such, his solo career got off to a pretty late start, and he wouldn't release his first EP, 1995's Instrument, until he was 34. His style of ambient music is very techno-based. One early release of his that I particularly like is a cover he did of the Rolling Stones' Paint It Black. You can barely recognize what it's supposed to be covering, but I love it. It's fun to give it a listen and spot the original song motifs buried under all the experimentation. Fun fact, I discovered both Grouper and Fennesz because a friend of mine was kind enough to include a song from each of them on a playlist he made for me. For Fennesz, he included his song Rivers of Sand off 2004's Venice. I've never actually encountered a river made out of sand, but if I ever do, I imagine it would sound something like this song. It sounds very buzzy and yet calming at the same time. The whole album is great, and listening to it in one go is very meditative. The songs on here are compact in terms of length, which makes it feel more conventional than the genre usually does. The only vocals on this album are on the song The Point of It All, and are done by guest singer David Sylvain, most famous for his time with the band Japan, a band which I don't know anything about. Regardless, they're a good touch. And behind Rivers of Sand, this is my favorite song on the album. Also, yes, I do recognize the alliterative humor of Venice by Fennesz. I didn't listen to any other full-length albums other than this for a while, but while doing listening research for this video, I checked out his latest album, 2019's Agora. Whereas Venice was compact with its song lengths, this album is absolutely sprawling. It's 47 minutes spread over 4 songs, and boy does it feel that way. Don't worry, that's a compliment. If Venice sounded meditative, then this album sounds like you're on drugs. Don't worry, that's also a compliment. It's a kind of album that fades into the background, but you're always aware that it's there, which is exactly what Eno wanted the genre to be like when he first coined the term ambient music. As I do with many of these records, I first listened to this while doing homework, and let's just say I was very productive. Up next, we're going to be heading back to North America, specifically Canada. It's time to talk about one Tim Hecker. Another artist I discovered thanks to the aforementioned friend playlist. Thanks, David. Tim Hecker was born in Vancouver, but moved to France Light, Quebec, as a young adult. That would be where his musical journeys began. He fell in love with the techno genre and began recording under the synonym Jetone. He soon became disillusioned with danceable music, however, and decided to make dreamable music. He released his debut album, Haunt Me, Do It Again, in 2001, but the first album of his I heard was 2006's Harmony in Ultraviolet. Your eye might first be caught with song titles such as Rainbow Blood and Spring-Heeled Jack Flies Tonight. Interesting titles aside, this is a killer album. Very eerie, yet calming to chill out to. My favorite songs are Chimeras and Dungeoneering. Truthfully though, there isn't a bad song on this record, and I also dig the 4-part Harmony in Blue series of songs. As a history nerd, I also love this album cover. It shows a memorial dedicated to the members of the Italian resistance who died while fighting fascism. Fun fact, this was released on the same record label, Cranky, that put out Godspeed You! Black Emperor's first album. Whatever talent scouts they have there, they're doing their job well. One other album of his I really like is one that I admittedly listened to just because of its title. Rave Death 1972. In case you were wondering, 1972 is the year the album Photograph was taken, while Rave Death is a word that popped into Hecker's head, and even he doesn't understand it. This album was recorded in the land of the ice and snow, Iceland. It's interesting that it was recorded surprisingly analog for such a digital genre. There's extensive use of a church organ, and the effect is masterful. I'll admit I never pay attention to the songs when this album is playing, so I can't recommend any specifically. That being said, I strongly encourage you to check this out. Pitchfork gave it an 8.6, and that has to count for something, right? If I mentioned every artist who made 1 or 2 good ambient albums, then this video would be 3 hours long. This section is just going to be quickly mentioning artists that don't get their own chapter, but that I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I didn't say their names. 9 Inch Nails is a name that a lot of you have probably heard. While they're by no means an ambient band, Trent has dipped his toe into the genre more than once. Alongside each album having sprinkles here and there, he released a whole record in the genre with 2009's Ghosts 1 through 4. This album is a lot to get through with its crushing 110-minute length, so it's best listened to over a span of days. The song 34 Ghosts 4 ended up being sampled in a very popular song. Can't play it here because I'll get demonetized, but listen to it for yourself and you'll recognize it. At the start of quarantine, he jumped back in, releasing Ghosts 5 Together and Ghosts 6 Locusts for free as a treat to help get us through the hard times. Both of them are very much worth checking out. Boards of Canada are the only artists I've mentioned so far who aren't a solo project. Formed in Scotland, not Canada, by Michael Sanderson and Marcus Owen, they got their start by releasing a series of EPs and mini-albums, some of which, according to Wikipedia, have not been widely released. To all the collectors out there, that can be your next mission. Their music is a little too beat-heavy to be fully ambient, but they're ambient enough to where I had to mention them. Their 1998 debut, Music Has the Right to Children, is 63 minutes of awesomeness. One thing that's cool about them is that they have a good amount of mini-songs. On this record, for instance, of the 17 songs, 7 are under 2 minutes in length. A very good album to zen out to. Their follow-up, Geo Gaddy, was the more popular one according to Spotify. While I personally prefer their debut, and not just because I have the vinyl, they're both killer. Definitely a nice 1-2 punch to start out your career with. Coming from the land of the ice and snow, Norway... Oh wait, I already used that joke for Iceland. Oh well. Deathprod is one of the kings of the dark ambient subgenre. This ambient music is meant to make you feel uneasy while listening. Masochistic, indeed. His 2004 album, Morals and Dogma, is a true masterpiece of musical horror. Its highlight is the 17-minute Dead People's Things. The song is centered around a small number of motifs, and yet it's still interesting to listen to, like being hypnotized. As terrifying as it is, I'm sure he's a nice guy in real life. So there you have it. For an album that was originally designed to be ignorable, ambient music is very enjoyable to listen to. The umbrella is large enough so that there can be many different variants, so there are artists for people of all sorts of tastes. Even the bad tastes. Just kidding. Now that I've done a fair bit of talking, I want you to do a fair bit of listening. Take any of the artists I've just mentioned and go check them out. If you like them, awesome, you have new music to add to your rotation. If not, hey, at least you tried something new. If you're still watching by now, I just want to say thank you so much for giving me your time. If you like what you saw, be sure to like and hit subscribe. I upload these videos whenever I can, and I always have a ton of fun making them. Hopefully you have as much fun watching them. If you have an idea for a video you want me to do, leave it down in the comments. Who knows, maybe I'll get to it. I'm RobbieJ2734. I will see you when I see you next.